When his father died, he didn't leave much behind. A few acres, an old tractor, some savings, and one thing no one understood: a hand-drawn map, folded inside a Bible, with a single X marked on the corner of the land, and two words written next to it: "Dig here." People laughed when they heard about it, said it didn't make sense, said if there was anything worth finding, someone would have found it already, especially not 6 feet down. But his father had drawn that map over decades, watching the land, studying it, not guessing, knowing. So one morning, with nothing but a shovel, he went out to that spot. No machines, no drilling rig, no guarantee. Just a mark on paper and a reason to trust it. And when the shovel hit something 6 feet down, everything changed. His father's name was Arthur Phelps. 71 when he passed, and he had spent most of his life on that same land, not just working it, watching it. Every season, every storm, every year the rain came late, or didn't come at all. He paid attention to things most people didn't. How water moved after a heavy rain, where it pooled, where it disappeared, which parts of the ground dried first, and which stayed soft a little longer. He marked it all, not in a notebook, not in a system anyone else could follow, but in his own way. Year after year, he built a picture of that land, layer by layer, until he understood something most people never noticed: that water didn't just sit on the surface. It moved, through cracks, through stone, through places you couldn't see, unless you'd been watching long enough. And over time, he found a pattern, a point where everything seemed to lead. The same place, every time. That's what the X marked. Not a guess, not a hope, a conclusion. But to everyone else, it didn't look like that. It looked like an old man's idea, a story he told himself after too many years in the same place. Because if there was water there, real water, someone would have drilled for it already, would have tested it, measured it, proved it. That's how things were done now. Not with a shovel, not with a map, and definitely not based on something someone had noticed. That's why they laughed. Because to them, it didn't look like knowledge. It looked like a gamble. The spot wasn't hard to find. The map had been clear, right along the northwest edge, where the ground dipped just enough to notice, if you knew what to look for. From the outside, it didn't seem like anything special. No signs of water, no change in the soil, nothing that suggested there was anything beneath it. Just dry ground, like everywhere else. He started digging anyway. At first, it was easy. Topsoil, loose enough to move quickly, a few inches at a time. Then it got heavier, denser, each shovel taking a little more effort. The sun climbed higher, the ground pushed back harder, and still nothing. A couple of neighbors stopped by, stood off to the side, watching. Didn't say much at first, just enough to make it clear what they were thinking. "You really believe there's something down there? 6 feet isn't going to change anything. You'd be better off drilling like everyone else." He kept digging. Didn't argue, didn't try to convince them, because at that point, there wasn't anything to prove, not yet. 3 feet down, just more dirt. 4, the soil turned rougher, mixed with rock. 5, the shovel started hitting resistance. Harder than before, each strike echoing a little differently. And that's when it slowed. Because now, it wasn't about effort. It was about whether anything was actually there. and standing there, looking into a hole that had taken hours to dig, with nothing to show for it. The question started to creep in. Not whether his father believed it, but whether he was right. The next strike sounded different, not softer, not louder, just different. The shovel didn't sink the same way. It stopped, sharp, clean. He cleared the dirt around it, slowly, carefully, until the surface showed. Stone, flat, solid. Not just a rock, a layer. A shelf running across the bottom of the hole. That's when he paused, because this wasn't what he had been expecting. Not exactly. But then he remembered something his father used to say. Water doesn't always sit where you see it. It moves where it can. He knelt down, ran his hand across the stone, feeling along its edge, looking for anything that didn't match. And then he found it. A narrow fracture, barely visible, running through the rock. He tapped it once, then again. The sound echoed differently there, hollow. He drove the shovel into it, just enough to break it open. And for a moment, nothing happened. Just silence, dust settling. Then a drop, small, almost nothing. Then another, and another, until the crack darkened, and water started to move, not forced, not pumped, just rising. Slow at first, then steady, seeping through the fracture, like it had been waiting there all along. And standing there, watching it fill the bottom of that hole. There was only one thing left to understand. His father hadn't guessed. He had known. At first, it was just a trickle, barely enough to notice unless you were looking right at it. But it didn't stop. The water kept coming, slow, steady, filling the bottom of the hole inch by inch, clearing the dust, darkening the soil around it, until it was no longer something you had to look for. It was there, visible, undeniable. He stepped back, gave it space, just watching it rise. The same spot people had walked past for years, now holding something they said wasn't there. Word spread faster this time. It always does when something doesn't make sense. The same neighbors who had stood there earlier came back, not to question, just to see. One of them crouched down, ran his hand through the water, looked up, and didn't say anything, because there wasn't anything to argue with. Another stood at the edge of the hole, shaking his head slowly, not in disbelief, in realization, because what they were looking at wasn't luck, it wasn't coincidence, and it wasn't something you could explain away. It had been there the whole time, right where the map said it would be, and standing there, watching water rise out of dry ground. There was only one thing left to understand. The land hadn't changed. The water hadn't just appeared. Only one thing had changed. Someone finally dug where everyone else refused to. After that, things didn't go back to the way they were. The land didn't look the same anymore. Not because it had changed, but because people finally understood something about it. The same ground they had called dry had been holding something all along. It just needed the right place and the right moment to show it. He didn't celebrate it, didn't make a big deal out of it, didn't go back and remind anyone what they had said. He just covered the tools, stood there for a while, watching the water settle, because to him, this wasn't about proving anything. It was about understanding something his father had spent years learning that not everything valuable is visible, and not everything worth finding comes from machines or measurements. Some things come from time, from paying attention, from seeing patterns most people ignore, and trusting them even when no one else does. The map wasn't just a mark on paper. It was years of watching, years of learning, passed down in the simplest way possible. And standing there, with water rising out of dry ground, he understood something most people never do. That sometimes the difference between finding nothing and finding everything is knowing exactly where to dig.